This will make you beautiful, desired, untouchable. But if you ever take it off, everything you love will turn against you.
The old woman warned her only once. If you ever take this underwear off, everything you love will be destroyed. Lovetta laughed. 3 months later, she was married to the richest man in the village and crying silently every night in his bed. But before the magic, before the marriage, this was the girl no one wanted. They said she was cursed from birth, not because she brought bad luck, but because she was unwanted. In a village where beauty decided a woman's future, Lovetta had already lost hers before it began. Men ignored her, women mocked her, even her own mother spoke of her like a burden that refused to leave. Then one evening, as Lovetta returned from the stream with aching arms and lowered eyes, an old woman stopped her on the path. Her clothes were torn, her voice was calm, and in her hands was a small folded cloth that will change Lovetta's life forever. That night, Lovetta put it on, and by morning, the village could no longer look away. In a village where beauty meant value, where a pretty face could secure a bride price that fed families for seasons, Lovetta had nothing. Her arms were thin like cassava stems after drought, her face was long and narrow, her skin marked with spots that never faded. When she walked through the market, eyes slid past her as if she were invisible. "That one will never marry," the women whispered, their voices sharp as thorns. Even her own mother looks away. Lovetta heard every word. She felt them sink into her chest and make a home there, heavy and cold. At 16, while other girls her age prepared for marriage ceremonies, she worked her mother's farm alone, her hands rough and cracked from labor. The sun beat down on her back, and sometimes she would stop, wipe the sweat from her face, and wonder what it felt like to be wanted. Her mother never said it aloud, but Lovetta saw the disappointment in her eyes. 3 daughters, and Lovetta was the last, the one who would bring no bride price, no alliance, no honor, just another mouth to feed until she died. But Lovetta carried something nobody knew about, something that hummed beneath her skin like a secret song. Any man who truly loved her, not for her body, not for status, but for the person she was, would find prosperity following his footsteps like a faithful shadow. Wealth would come to him, crops would flourish, even his words would carry weight in the community. The problem was simple and cruel. Nobody ever looked long enough to love her. She spent her evenings sitting outside her mother's compound, watching the village come alive with laughter and music. Young couples walked hand in hand. Mothers braided their daughters' hair for the next day's gatherings. And Lovetta sat alone, her heart aching with a loneliness so deep it felt like drowning on dry land. One evening, as the sun melted into orange and purple across the sky, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up, expecting someone to pass by as they always did. But the footsteps stopped. A young man stood before her. His name was Felix. "May I sit?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lovetta's throat tightened. Men didn't speak to her unless they wanted directions or had mistaken her for someone else. She nodded, unable to find words. Felix sat beside her on the wooden bench, a comfortable distance away. He didn't stare at her or look uncomfortable. He simply sat watching the sunset with her. "It's beautiful tonight," he said. "Yes," Lovetta whispered, her heart hammering so loud she was sure he could hear it. "I've seen you before," he said, turning slightly toward her. "At the farm. You work harder than anyone I know. You never stop even when the sun is highest and everyone else rests in the shade." Lovetta's eyes burned with sudden tears. Nobody had ever noticed her work. Nobody had ever noticed her at all. "My name is Felix," he said, extending his hand. She took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. "Lovetta," she managed to say. And for the first time in her life, when someone looked at her, they truly saw her. If you want to know what happens to Lovetta and whether she finally finds the love she's been searching for, subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. Felix began visiting Lovetta every evening. He brought her small gifts, a ripe mango, a carved wooden comb, once even a flower he'd found growing wild by the river. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his dreams of farming a large piece of land, of building a home where children could run and play. She told him about the stories her grandmother used to tell, about spirits and magic and lessons hidden in folk tales. "You have a good heart, Lovetta," Felix said one evening, his eyes serious. Her chest swelled with something unfamiliar. Hope. But the village noticed, and the village talked. What does Felix want with her? They asked, their voices dripping with confusion and mockery. Has he gone mad? There are beautiful girls here, girls with wide hips and smooth skin, and he chooses her? Felix's friends mocked him openly. Brother, what spell has this stick of a woman cast on you? They laughed, slapping their thighs. But Felix never wavered. He never flinched. He simply smiled and said, You don't see what I see. For 3 months, Felix courted Lovetta properly. He spoke to her mother, who nearly fainted from shock. He worked extra hours to save money for his small bride price, and Lovetta, for the first time in her life, felt what it meant to be cherished. Then, one night, everything changed. Lovetta was walking home from the stream. A clay pot balanced on her head when she saw a figure standing in the path ahead. An old woman, bent with age, her face hidden beneath a dark wrapper that covered her head and shoulders. The evening had turned grey, the last light bleeding from the sky, and something about the woman made Lovetta's skin prickle with unease. Lovetta, the old woman said, her voice like dried leaves scraping against stone. You know my name? Lovetta set down her pot carefully. I know more than your name, child. I know your heart. I know your pain. I know the blessing you carry that nobody has ever been wise enough to claim. Lovetta's breath caught. What are you talking about? The old woman stepped closer, and Lovetta could see her eyes now, ancient and knowing, like she had witnessed 1,000 lifetimes. There is a man who sees you truly, but the world is cruel to girls like you. They will never let you be happy as you are. They will poison his mind with their words until even he begins to doubt. No, Lovetta whispered, but fear crept into her heart. She had heard the whispers. She had seen the looks Felix received. The old woman reached into her wrapper and pulled out something small, folded carefully. This is a gift, she said, holding out a piece of underwear, simple, white, but shimmering slightly in the dying light. When you wear this, you will have the beauty the world thinks you need. You will be seen, you will be desired. Lovetta stared at the underwear, her mind spinning. Why would you give me this? Because every woman deserves to know what it feels like to be wanted, said the old woman softly. But hear me well, child. Once you put this on, you must never take it off. Never. Not for bathing, not for sleeping, not for any reason. If you do, everything will be lost. Do you understand? I don't know if I should. The choice is yours, the old woman interrupted, but choose quickly. The world will not wait for you to be ready. She pressed the underwear into her trembling hands and vanished into the darkness, leaving Lovetta alone on the path, her heart pounding and her mind racing. That night, Lovetta lay on her mat, staring at the underwear by the dim light of a palm oil lamp. She thought about Felix, about his kind eyes and gentle words. She thought about the villagers' cruel laughter, about her mother's disappointment, about a lifetime of being invisible. Her hands shook as she made her decision. She put on the underwear. The change was instant and terrifying. Her skin began to glow, smooth and radiant. Her body filled out, curves appearing where there had been only angles. Her face transformed, her eyes grew large and bright, her lips full, her features perfectly balanced. She looked down at her hands and saw they were no longer rough and cracked, but soft and elegant. She was beautiful, breathtakingly beautiful. And as she stared at her reflection in the small piece of broken mirror her mother owned, Lovetta felt something twist in her stomach, a warning she couldn't quite name. What had she done? Morning came too quickly. Lovetta woke before dawn, her body feeling strange, lighter somehow, but also heavier, as if the weight of something unseen pressed against her chest. She touched her face in the darkness, feeling the smooth skin, the new contours. Part of her hoped it had been a dream. The other part feared waking up and finding her old reflection staring back. When her mother called her for morning chores, Lovetta wrapped herself tightly in her wrapper before stepping outside. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her mother was bent over the cooking fire, blowing life into the embers. Lovetta, fetch water from... She looked up and the words died in her throat. The clay pot she'd been holding slipped from her fingers and shattered against the ground. Mama, Lovetta whispered. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Who are you? Where is my daughter? Mama, it's me. It's Lovetta. The older woman stumbled backward, shaking her head. No, this is witchcraft. This is... She squinted, moving closer, studying Lovetta's face in the growing light. Recognition flickered in her eyes, then shock, then something that looked almost like fear. Lovetta, how is this? What have you done? I can explain. But there was no time. The compound shared a wall with 3 other families, and already neighbors were emerging for their morning routines. One by one, they stopped and stared. A woman dropped her broom. A man walked directly into a pole, his eyes fixed on Lovetta. "Is that Lovetta?" someone whispered. "It cannot be. What kind of magic is this?" Within an hour, the entire village knew. By midday, Lovetta could not step outside without drawing a crowd. Men who had never spoken to her suddenly appeared at her mother's compound with gifts: yams, palm wine, fabric, even livestock. They stumbled over their words, their eyes hungry and desperate. "Lovetta, I have always admired you," said Chuka, a fisherman who once called her that ugly stick of a girl within her hearing. "Marry me," begged Emeka, a trader who laughed loudest at the jokes about her appearance. "I can give you everything," promised Obi, whose wife was pregnant with their 3rd child. Lovetta stood in the compound, overwhelmed, her hands shaking. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? To be seen, to be desired. Then she heard a familiar voice cutting through the noise. "Lovetta!" Felix pushed through the crowd, his face confused and concerned. When he reached her, he stopped, his eyes searching her face. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Lovetta's heart cracked. He didn't recognize her. He looked at her the way all the other men looked at her, with desire, with warmth, but without that spark of deep knowing that had made her feel truly seen. "Felix," she said softly, "it's me." His eyes widened. "Lovetta? What? How?" He shook his head as if to clear it. "What happened to you?" "Does it matter?" she asked, and hated how small her voice sounded. "I'm still me inside." "I know, Felix looked around at the crowd of men, at their eager faces, and something painful crossed his features. This is a lot." Before she could respond, a voice boomed across the compound. "Everyone clear away, let me through." The crowd parted for Jiwa, one of the wealthiest men in the village. He was broad-shouldered and handsome, known for his smooth words and business success. He wore fine clothes and walked with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Jiwa stopped in front of Lovetta, his eyes traveling slowly over her body in a way that made her skin crawl despite the admiration in his gaze. "So, the stories are true," he said, his voice rich and deep. "The gods have revealed your true beauty at last." He turned to her mother. "I wish to marry your daughter. Name your bride price. Whatever it is, I will pay double." Lovetta's mother, who had spent 16 years worrying her youngest daughter would die unwed and childless, looked at Jiwa with tears in her eyes. "Sir, you honor us." "No," Lovetta said firmly, "I'm promised to someone else." She reached for Felix's hand, but he pulled back a little, his face troubled. The small gesture cut deeper than any insult she'd ever received. Jiwa laughed, a sound like thunder. "Promised? To whom? That farmer's boy?" He looked at Felix with barely concealed contempt. "What can he offer you? A small farm and a life of struggle? I can give you a mansion, servants, respect, everything a woman of your beauty deserves." "Felix loves me," Lovetta said, her voice breaking. "He loved me before you were beautiful," Jiwa finished, his smile sharp. "Yes, very noble of him, but love doesn't fill stomachs or build houses. Think carefully, Lovetta. I'm offering you a life most women only dream of." Lovetta looked at Felix, silently begging him to say something, to fight for her the way he had fought against the village's mockery before. But Felix stood frozen, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. He could see the war happening inside him, the hurt, the confusion, the sudden inadequacy he felt standing next to a man like Jiwa. "Felix," she whispered. His eyes widened. "Maybe," Felix swallowed hard, "maybe you should think about what's best for you, Lovetta. Your life could be easier, better." "Better," she repeated, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "I just want you to be happy," he said, but he wouldn't look at her anymore. That night, Lovetta lay awake on her mat, tears sliding down her new, perfect face. The old woman's words echoed in her mind. They will poison his mind with their words until even he begins to doubt. She had been right. The next morning, Giwa returned with a bride price so extravagant it made her mother weep with joy. He brought 20 goats, 5 cows, countless bags of rice and yams, and enough fabric to clothe the entire compound for years. He spread it all out in the compound center like a conquered kingdom laid at a queen's feet. "All of this for Lovetta," he announced loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. "And this is just the beginning of what I'll provide for her." Lovetta's mother grabbed her daughter's hand, her grip desperate. "Please, Lovetta, please accept this blessing. Do you know what this means for our family, for your sister's children? We will never struggle again." Lovetta looked at the gifts, then at her mother's pleading face, then at the gathered crowd. She searched for Felix among them, but he wasn't there. He had stopped coming to see her the day her beauty revealed itself. "Where is Felix?" she asked quietly. Her mother's face hardened. "Felix is a good boy, but he cannot offer you this. He cannot offer us this. Sometimes we must be practical." "You mean sometimes we must sell ourselves?" "I mean sometimes we must survive," her mother snapped, then softened. "Please, my daughter, I have worried for you every day of your life. Let me die knowing you are taken care of." Lovetta felt the magical underwear against her skin, impossible to remove, binding her to this new reality. She thought about the blessing she carried, about how any man who truly loved her would prosper. But who could truly love her now? How would she ever know if someone loved her or just her beauty? She looked at Giwa, at his confident smile and calculating eyes, and made a choice born of exhaustion and broken hope. "I accept," she said. The compound erupted in celebration. Only Lovetta heard the sound of her own heart breaking, a small, quiet sound lost in the noise of everyone else's joy. 3 days later, Lovetta married Giwa in a ceremony grander than any the village had ever seen. And the moment they sealed their union, something shifted in the air. Something invisible but powerful, like a door opening in the spirit world. That night, as Giwa slept beside her in his large bed in his large house, Lovetta felt blessing leave her body like breath-leaving lungs. It flowed into Giwa. When he woke the next morning, everything he touched turned profitable. A business deal he thought lost suddenly succeeded. A piece of land he owned was discovered to hold valuable clay. Even his words carried new weight. When he spoke in the village square, people listened and agreed. Within weeks, Giwa became the richest man in 3 villages. And within months, he became the cruelest husband Lovetta could have imagined. But that darkness was only just beginning to reveal itself, hiding behind smiles and sweet words, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Giwa's compound grew twice its size within the first month of marriage. New buildings rose from the earth, storage houses for his multiplying goods, quarters for servants he hired with wealth that seemed to flow from an endless source. Traders came from distant villages, eager to do business with the man whose fortune had exploded overnight. Whatever Giwa invested in flourished. Whatever he touched turned to profit. But Lovetta watched from the windows of her decorated prison and understood the terrible truth. The blessing was working. The gift she carried, the prosperity that came to any man who truly loved her, had activated. But Giwa didn't love her. He couldn't. He had married her for her beauty, for status, for possession. So why was he prospering? "Because," she whispered to herself one evening, staring at her reflection in the polished bronze mirror Giwa had bought her, "he thinks he loves me." It was the illusion of love, the performance of it, the shallow emotion that looks like love from the outside but had no roots, no depth. And somehow, terrifyingly, it was enough to trigger the blessing. For the first 3 months, Giwa treated her like a prized possession. He dressed her in the finest clothes, adorned her with jewelry, paraded her at gatherings so other men could see what he owned and envy him for it. He was attentive in public, his hand always at her waist, his voice always sweet when others could hear. But in private, things were different. "Don't wear that wrapper," he would say when she dressed in the mornings. "It makes you look common. Wear the red one, the expensive one." "I like this one," she would reply quietly. "I didn't ask what you liked, I told you what to wear." Small commands at first, minor corrections, but they multiplied like insects in the rainy season, crawling over every part of her life until she couldn't move without wondering if she would displease him. "Smile more when my guests arrive. Don't speak unless I ask you a question. Your laugh is too loud, it embarrasses me." Each instruction carved away a piece of her, until she barely recognized the girl who used to sit outside her mother's compound, dreaming to be seen. Now she was seen constantly, but she felt more invisible than ever. The first time Giwa hit her, it was over something small. She had given his business partner water before asking Giwa's permission to be hospitable. The slap came so fast she didn't see it coming, just felt the explosion of pain across her cheek and the ringing in her ears that followed. "You make me look weak," Giwa hissed, his handsome face twisted with rage. "When you act without my instruction, you make others think you don't respect me." Lovitha touched her burning cheek, too shocked to cry. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she didn't know what she was apologizing for. Giwa's anger evaporated as quickly as it had come. He pulled her into an embrace, his voice suddenly gentle. "I know, my love, I know. You're still learning how to be the wife of an important man. It's my fault for not teaching you properly." He kissed her forehead. "I only want us to be respected. You understand, don't you?" She nodded against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and calm, as if nothing had happened. That night, as he slept peacefully beside her, Lovitha lay awake, her cheeks still throbbing, and wondered how her life had become this. She thought about Felix and felt a pain worse than any slap. She hadn't seen him since the wedding. Rumors said he had taken up farming on his family's land, that he kept to himself now, that he had become quiet and withdrawn. Did he think of her? Did he regret letting her go? Did it matter anymore? Months passed and Giwa's wealth grew obscene. He built a house 3 times the size of his original compound with imported tiles and carved furniture. He bought land across multiple villages. He began to involve himself in village politics, his new wealth giving him influence over decisions that affected everyone. And with each new achievement, Giwa's treatment of Lovitha worsened. The slaps became frequent. Then came the shoves. Then nights when he would rage at her for hours over perceived disrespect. A glance he misinterpreted, a greeting he thought too friendly to another man, a meal that wasn't perfect. "You are making me do this," he would say after each incident, his voice thick with false remorse. "If you would just listen, if you would just be better, I wouldn't lose my temper." Lovitha learned to be small. She learned to anticipate his moods, to read the tightness in his jaw or the hardness in his eyes that signaled danger. She learned which servants to trust and which ones reported her every move to Giwa. She learned how to cry silently so he wouldn't hear her and become angry about her sadness. But she never learned how to remove the magical underwear. She tried once, late at night when Giwa was away on business. She pulled at it desperately, her hands shaking, but it wouldn't move. It clung to her skin as if it had grown from her body, as if it had become part of her. She pulled until her fingers bled, until she collapsed on the floor sobbing, but the underwear remained. The old woman's warning echoed in her mind. Never take it off. Never. But the old woman had never warned her about this, about being trapped in beauty while being destroyed from within. One evening, Giwa returned home with news that made his eyes gleam with triumph. "The council has decided," he announced, pouring himself palm wine. "I am to be the next village head. They voted unanimously." Lovitha, sitting quietly in the corner as she had learned to do, felt her stomach turn. More power, more influence, more control. "Congratulate me," Giwa said, turning to her. "Congratulations," she said softly, louder, with enthusiasm. "I just achieved what men dream about their entire lives." "Congratulations," she repeated, forcing brightness into her voice. "Better." He drank deeply, then studied her with that calculating look she had come to dread. "You know what this means, don't you? You are going to be the village head's wife. You will need to be perfect. No more mistakes. No more embarrassing me." "I understand." "Do you?" He set down his cup and walked towards her, his hand reaching out to grip her chin, forcing her to look at him. In his eyes, she saw something that terrified her more than his anger ever had. Boredom. He was becoming bored with her, and a man like Giwa, with resources and power and no conscience, would not stay faithful to a wife who bored him. That night, after Giwa fell asleep beside her, Lovitha crept out of their bedroom and stood in the compound under the moonlight. She looked up at the stars, the same stars she used to watch with Felix when the world seemed full of possibility, and she prayed. "Please," she whispered to the old woman, to the spirits, to anyone who might be listening. "Please help me. I'm trapped. I'm dying slowly in this beautiful cage, and I don't know how to escape." The wind stirred the trees, and for a moment, Lovitha thought she heard a voice, ancient and knowing. Every gift has a price. Every choice has a consequence, but not all doors are locked forever. Before she could process the words, she heard footsteps behind her. "What are you doing out here?" Giwa's voice was cold and suspicious. Lovitha turned, her heart racing. "I couldn't sleep. I just needed air." "Who were you talking to?" "No one. I was praying." "Praying?" Giwa moved closer, and in the moonlight, his face looked like a stranger's. "Or planning. Are you meeting someone? Is that it? Have you been unfaithful to me?" "No," Giwa backed away. "I swear, I was just what? Just scheming? Just plotting to embarrass me?" His voice rose with each word. "I give you everything and this is how you repay me. Sneaking around at night like a common whore." "Giwa, please." But his hand was already rising and Lovitha knew that this time would be worse than all the others. She closed her eyes, bracing for impact. Instead, she heard a different voice cut through the night. "Get away from her." Lovitha's eyes flew open. Standing at the compound entrance, silhouetted by moonlight, was Felix, and the look on his face said he was done walking away.